Good morning, everyone. This is John Heerdink. If you don't recognize me, well, this is John Heerdink from San Francisco. I'm the managing member of Tribe Public. I really appreciate all of you coming in from around the world. We have a very large group and growing here at Tribe Public. And this is a venue that we're looking to get in front of CEOs, of leaders and experts that we all care about that are part of the tribe. Thanks again for joining. Thanks again for being so interested in our speakers today. Pictured is Dr. Quay in the blue jacket right there, and Kyle Guse right here. He is the CFO of Atossa, and of course the founder and CEO is Dr. Quay, the experts in the field that we're all interested in, both in COVID as well as breast cancer. Exciting news today from Atossa. Again, remember this trading symbol is on the NASDAQ is ATOS. I really appreciate the questions that all of you have sent. Know that you can also send further questions to me via the Zoom chat feature, and please feel welcome to do so. And we'll do our best. We typically try to get these in 30 minutes. That's what the company's allowed today. And we'll do our best to cover those and get them to do the PowerPoint. And but I'll have Dr. Quay say just a couple minutes to introduce himself, and then we'll have Kyle start the presentation, and then after that we'll do the Q&A. Thanks again. If we don't get it all answered today, we'll try to get them back on here as soon as possible. And again, thanks for your attention today. Dr. Quay.
Thanks, John. It's really great to be in front of your audience once again here. So we'll get to some exciting news today about Atossa, but just, I guess, my background briefly: MD, Ph.D. from the University of Michigan, trained at MIT and Harvard, and then taught at Stanford when I started my first company. This is company number 7. I've invented 7 FDA-approved drugs, have over 87 patents. So really excited about Atossa's 2021 plans, both in breast cancer and in COVID therapeutics. I'll turn it over to Kyle with that.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks again, John, for having us back on. Again, this is Kyle Guse. I'm the CFO and General Counsel of Atossa. I've been with Atossa about 8 years now. Prior to that, I did M&A and capital markets work in Silicon Valley for biotech companies. I'm now focused on Atossa's finances and legal matters. I mean, what Steve didn't mention is that he has invented therapies that have been used in over 80 million people worldwide. Quite an accomplishment. So let me pull up the slide deck here, and we'll go through some of the slides very quickly and not touch on them, and some will go down in more detail. A lot of you have heard our story. So let me get this started here. The slide deck's also available on our website in case any of you want to refer to it later. We are an SEC reporting company. For decision. So we're a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on 2 huge areas of unmet need: breast cancer and COVID-19. We essentially have 4 programs, 2 programs in breast health and 2 in COVID-19. On the breast health side, just this morning, we announced that we have stopped our study in Australia. It was a phase 2 study, and we have halted it because of the overwhelmingly positive results that we have seen there. That'll allow us to accelerate the development of endoxifen here in the United States. So that was a very significant milestone for us. We're also planning a phase 2 study in Stockholm, Sweden, again, using our endoxifen. And then the 2 COVID-19 programs that Dr. Quay will talk about a little more are AT301, which is a nasal spray for at-home use, and then ATH201, which is inhalation therapy. The bios, we've been through these briefly already. Corporate snapshot. I wanted to update people on our cash position because we have been pretty active in the capital markets, and we've also been active having some of our warrants exercised. So over the last 60 days or so, we've raised an additional $81 million net, in addition to the $9 million we had on our balance sheet at the end of September. Also on this slide 5 highlights our current outstanding capital stock. We have about 94 million shares of common outstanding, which equates to a market cap of over $300 million now for Atossa on a fully diluted basis. This next slide 6 is a pipeline of our 4 programs. Slide 7, it seems obvious, but I'll touch on it anyway. We're dealing with some very large market opportunities. You know, I'm astounded every time I update this chart for the current COVID cases and COVID deaths. 2.2 million deaths worldwide now from COVID-19. Over 100 million people have been infected with COVID-19 worldwide. Then over on the breast cancer side, there's a lot of women at high risk of getting breast cancer. You know, 39 million mammograms every year, and about 10 million of those mammograms will show that a woman is at high risk of getting breast cancer. And then finally, there are also about 200,000 ER-positive breast cancer patients in the US, and that's sort of the focus of our endoxifen cancer therapy is for these ER-positive breast cancer patients. You know, slide 8 is sort of an overview of the pathway to development for our therapies. The one thing I'll point out here is that we do plan to obtain partners ultimately before we get to the finish line with these therapies. We don't plan on going it alone, and so that's one thing that I would just highlight here. You know, on slide 9, maybe I'll turn it back over to Dr. Quay to talk a little bit about COVID-19.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Kyle. So just again, to set a framework, we know most of this, but just to remind you, stage 1 of the disease, the early infection, and probably the asymptomatic time frame is in the nasal cavity. So the back of the throat is included there. And that's from the initial infection through day 3. If it progresses, it begins to go down into the lungs, the upper lungs first, and finally the bronchi and alveoli later by days 3 to 10. And if your immune system doesn't stop it, then it breaks across the blood system and becomes a systemic infection. That's when it's that's when you're in really serious condition. Next slide, Kyle. So from a therapeutic standpoint, we see 4 touch points where a company like Atossa can have products. The nasal spray at the time of early diagnosis, and for partners who you may be living with who don't have the disease and you want to prevent it. But if you progress to the hospital, there'll have to be systemic treatment to keep it out of the bloodstream and to stop it in the lungs. Our inhalation program is really to keep you off the ventilator or to get you off quickly once you get on it, because ventilator associated COVID has very high morbidities, very high costs, and is where patients usually die. And there's a new area of focus for 2021 that I want to talk about in the research area, which is what we call the long haul COVID patient. Those are defined as people who've completed COVID. They have no more infection, but 90 days after the infection, they still are not back to baseline. They're still back to normal. It's about 25% of people. So we're now at 25 million and growing in this population of patients who need therapy in that post recovery phase. Next slide. So as the vaccines roll out, I get a lot of questions around what's the role of therapeutics. And I remind people, well, influenza's been around for 3 decades. We get a vaccine every fall. We still spend over $1 billion on therapeutics in patients who, for one reason or another, the vaccine doesn't work. They end up in the hospital and they need a treatment for their influenza, not just a vaccine. So therapeutics will be very important here. Some of the areas that we're seeing already is an alternative. What I mean by that is there are certain patients, for example, in Norway, there's been a study where the very old patients, those who you think might be the most appropriate for a vaccine, are having a very high death rate. So perhaps we ought to think about maybe those patients having a prophylactic therapy that they could use when they go out to the grocery store, but not necessarily vaccinate them. The next is sort of a belts and suspenders approach. We've seen in Israel, for example, the country with the highest vaccination rate, that we still have major new epidemics of numbers of patients growing. So in some cases, that's probably a reflection that the immunity isn't as strong as we think, but we don't know. We don't really measure immunity, right? You get your vaccine and you think you're done. So for people facing businesses, service businesses, grocery stores, TSA folks, a belts and suspenders approach could be an important addition. Next slide. Another, of course, is the bridge to vaccine 2.0. We already are seeing variants, one identified as the United Kingdom variant, the other is South African variant, that are breaking through and causing a new wave of growth. So the South African one is a little bit worrisome because now the vaccines are only about 20% effective. That doesn't sound like a lot. It's still pretty good. It still will be sufficient. But we'll get to a point where there'll be a new strain that's escaped, and there's going to have to be a bridge to the vaccine 2.0, and that's a critical role for a therapeutic. And again, I've already spoken of the post-COVID recovery phase, where up to 35% of patients, 100 million patients total, 35 million right now and counting, could have a need for a therapeutic after they've already had the disease. Next slide. So the ATH-201 program is designed to be, there are 2 FDA-approved drugs, but we're using them in a new setting, pulmonary delivery. And they're designed to interfere with the first interaction that the virus makes. The spike protein of the virus interacts with a protein called ACE2, and these 2 compounds interfere with that. They're much like a chemical vaccine. But they work instantly. They don't require the 10 days for your immune system during an infection or the 28 days for a vaccine. And so the role there is to use them in patients who have not gone to the ventilator but are having pulmonary difficulty and they're looking like they're a candidate, or for people on the ventilator where we put it in the side port and we get them off. We are intending to begin clinical trials, probably overseas, in the next few months. Next slide. The nasal program, AT301, is it's interesting, it's for the next stage in the virus. So I've already spoken about the virus interacting with the ACE2 spike protein, the spike protein interacting with ACE2 of the body. But that's basically putting the key in the lock. To get into your house, you need to turn the key. And in this virus, the turning of the key is 3 proteases, 3 scissors on the surface of the host cell. That actually have to clip the spike protein, and when they open it, it's like that jack-in-the-box, and the spring opens, the spike protein springs out, and the RNA goes into your body and you're infected. So this formulation blocks all 3 enzymes. The beauty of this is I don't care what the virus does in terms of its mutations. You know, it mutates every 2 weeks, but these enzymes never mutate. Okay, so this is a very stable therapeutic product, and it was designed to target those steps for that reason. We completed a phase 1 trial in Australia towards the end of last year. We are right now, when I'm getting done with this presentation, we'll be going through the tables and listings on that data in order to be able to report it out to you. And then we expect to move on to later clinical trials and other testing this year. Next slide. So I think I would like to talk about our window of opportunity press release today. And so this is a nice segue. We all know that breast cancer is a major problem. 1 in 8 women get it, 250,000 women diagnosed every year. It's the 2nd leading cause of cancer in American women. Next slide. The window of opportunity, what does that mean? That is it's a description of a period of time between the day of diagnosis and surgery and then radiation therapy following that. So it's typically 2, 3, 4 weeks. One of the challenges in oncology last year and this year is that COVID has generated, this window has gotten much longer, and it's now stretching into months and months. Much more critical problems, separate conversation that we could have here. But in our setting, we have identified an unmet need in ER-positive breast cancer patients. It's the most common breast cancer. It's the least used in the neoadjuvant setting, and that's because drugs take too long to work. Again, we're talking about a 2, 3, or 4 week window of opportunity here. So endoxifen works very quickly. You literally get therapeutic blood levels 4 hours after the first pill. You're at steady state within 7 days. So we designed a trial in Australia with our statisticians. Again, a little bit of clinical trial back office here. When you do a trial, you ask your statisticians how many patients you should do. he or she immediately says, well, what do you think is going to be the effect of your drug? And so you describe what you think would be the likely effect of your drug against placebo or against historical findings. And then he turns the statistical crank and he says, in this case, based on what you think the drug will do, you should do 25 patients. So we started the trial, we've doing patients. And of course, we reported several months ago that this thing is working much better than we expected. And we finally did a seventh patient, and we made a determination that there's really no point in going further with this. We've achieved more than we needed to. We didn't need to do 25 patients because the efficacy was greater than we thought. What that does practically is it probably takes a year off the development of this program. We can now pivot into working with the US FDA to design a trial to begin this year sometime. And I'm really excited about that because, again, the major breast cancer, ER-positive breast cancer, does not have a drug in the neoadjuvant setting. Next slide. We've talked about this previously. This is the strong efficacy that allowed us to terminate this trial early. Next slide. The other end of the spectrum. So we talked about now using it right before surgery for 2 or 3 weeks. We also had, in cooperation with the FDA, the opportunity to test it in a single patient in what's called expanded access or compassionate use. And this is a woman who had ER-positive breast cancer, but did not have the enzymes that allowed her to take the other drugs that are typically used after you've had your surgery and radiation. So her father's a physician. He looked on the internet and he said, he called me up and he said, Steve, I think endoxifen is the best drug for her. Can we get it? We worked with the FDA and we were able to get it. So in December of 2018, she began having it before her surgery, again in that window of opportunity setting. And then the FDA allowed us to give it to her after surgery in the adjuvant setting. And she's now, it's been since December 2018. And this is a really important opportunity because it gives us a roadmap of what we want to do with our FDA approval process for endoxifen. Next slide. Another indication is to use it in mammographic breast density reduction. So here, as you can see on the breast on the right, which is high density, it would be very, very hard to find a white cancer in that breast. When you reduce the density, as you see on the left, suddenly that little white circle, the cancer, appears. Next slide. So this is a gradation which shows the different levels of density here in a gradation of 6. So the other thing besides hiding tumors in the breast, the other thing density does besides hiding the tumors is it's actually an independent risk factor of cancer itself. So on this particular slide, you see that the lowest density is set as a risk of cancer of 1.0, just an arbitrary scale. But then you see as you get more and more dense going from left to right, you end up with over a 5-fold increased risk, 500% increased risk of breast cancer in that most dense breast. So density has 2 problems: hard to find cancers in the breast when you take the mammogram, and it predicts future breast cancer. And we hope in our clinical trials we'll be able to show that we can affect both of those problems, those unmet needs surrounding dense breasts. Next slide. So these are upcoming milestones. Maybe Kyle, if you want to kind of run through these, I'll go on mute here until we go to the Q&A.
Yeah, we have four milestones coming up here. The first of which is for our ATH-201 COVID-19 inhalation therapy. We expect to receive regulatory approval to open our study with that new drug in the first quarter here. Also in the first quarter, we expect to report our final phase 1 results from our nasal spray product for COVID-19. And then we have a couple of upcoming milestones in our program using endoxifen in this window of opportunity. One will be to report final data from the early termination of our Australian study. And the other will be to get, in the second quarter, FDA input about the pathway here in the United States for that drug. Finally, using endoxifen to treat breast density, we'll get regulatory approval and open that study in Stockholm once COVID-19 allows for that there. They're under lockdown orders now. And so as a practical matter, clinical studies aren't really enrolling patients. So we don't have a more specific data around that other than it'll coincide with the COVID-19 pandemic there. And I think, John, those are our substantive slides. It looked like you had gotten some questions. I wonder if we should tee some of those up.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, let me put this back in gallery view here. Yeah, we're getting a breath. We've got a massive crowd here today, guys. It looks like you're becoming to be quite the topic around the world here. It's pretty amazing. Thanks again for everybody that's joined us from, I know, at least 20 plus countries today. And obviously the work that these gentlemen and the company Atossa is doing is truly remarkable. I'm in awe, and I've been following this company for a few years. And by the way, have been invested in through my Vista Partners registered investment advisor that I run. That website's at vistapglobal.com. So you might want to check out there the updates on Atossa as we move forward. And as I create content regularly there about Atossa and other companies. One of the questions that seems to be burning on many and repeated is the idea of partnerships. And you mentioned it in your presentation, but can you speak to your strategy around this, around the COVID programs and breast cancer, and why you would look to do partnerships? Is there any substantive discussions? What can you speak to and share with the group today?
Yeah, it's a great question, John, and we really divide and conquer here at Atossa. So Kyle's primarily in charge with the partnership negotiations and discussions and that sort of thing. So strategically, he's already indicated that we do not intend to take these all the way to the market ourselves. In my experience and the other drugs that I've invented and partnered, getting solid phase 2 data and a path forward in phase 3, that is the FDA's opined on your phase 3 protocol, probably that's the sweet spot for finding a partner. And then you let the partner do the phase 3 trial. But I'll let Kyle elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we substantially enhanced our balance sheet with these capital raises is so that we would be in a better position to negotiate with potential partners. And one sort of basic idea behind the need for a partner is that we are developing therapies that will be in high demand around the world. A small biotech company will not build out a sales force in all the major countries and conduct a worldwide launch of products to treat a global pandemic or to treat breast cancer which affects women around the world. So really, as a practical matter, we need partners to ultimately commercialize these products.
And that's a typical approach. I've been investing in around biotech and actually worked in biotech right out of university years ago. That's typical approach in development stage biotechs. And it's to get this out to the world and distribute it. It's not likely that companies like Atossa are there going to build out a sales force. It can happen at times, some people, but most of the time it's great to bring on these partners that already have this distribution around the world, the big pharma, et cetera. As we've seen, if you guys are liking it to, if you will, Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola in another industry, right, doesn't typically develop their own beverages these days. They let somebody else do it, like vitamin water, where they bought them out after getting, I think there was over $100 million in revenue there. And then put them in their distribution system, and then the company took off. Very similar in the biotech space. That's typically come on, and it adds to the balance sheet, adds to the development process, sometimes helps speed the process along. Very typical. As far as AT301, can you speak to this understanding around the idea is, I believe you're looking to go into the early stage patient, and it simply put is it looks to increase the immune system and develop that once the onset of COVID in the first stage comes on, and that's what we're looking to go after first, I believe. And there's some thinking around and belief that there might be even some preventative measures. Maybe can you speak to that subject?
Yeah, John, I'd like to, and kind of correct something that you said there. So How does COVID work? Well, usually one person gets infected. They have minimal symptoms for 0 to 3 days, and then they go into it and they have it for about 14 days. If they live with another adult in an inside environment, there's about an 84% chance, based on clinical trials, that other person will become infected. And frankly, some of the more classic cultures where you have 3 generations living, for example, in Italy and in other areas, in China as well, those tended to be settings where you had a high mortality in that 3rd generation. So our thinking is that, and I'm sorry, and then the other thing, in the patient who's infected, the virus goes into your cells. It spends about 10 hours building its new viruses. It explodes, it infects the neighboring cells. So these cycles. So the concept is that if you may not get your first dose there, obviously, when the first infection is there, but by keeping a dose in the nasal mucosa, so let's say you take it 3 times a day for 14 days, and that every time the virus buds and goes out and tries to look for another cell, the formulation is there. The scissors are no longer capable of cutting any of the spike proteins, and it's inert. I mean, the craziness about this virus is that's infected 100 million people is it's Pandora's box. If you do not open the box, it's inert. It could sit there for 2 centuries and nothing would happen to it. So that's the principle around the patient who's been infected. The same thing works even better in the patient who has not been infected. You prevent that first administration, the first contact with the cell. So you can go ahead and inhale it, but if our formulation is sitting there and the enzymes can't activate it, you're putting the key in the door, but you can't turn the lock.
I see. Thank you. I guess follow up on that. Is there any sort of strategy or thinking that the nasal spray T301, as you push forward with trials, that you might get introduced in one country over another before another? What is the current thinking as far as the development through the FDA, et cetera? I know you've done some, and the reason it's coming up is you've done some trials in Australia, et cetera, and maybe you could help us clear up that understanding.
Sure. So we all know, I mean, everyone, even in and out of the industry, knows this term of emergency use authorization, EUA, which no one knew about 2 years ago, but this would be a candidate for that. So the concept would be to get effective data in the phase 2 setting around early treatment and prevention, and then to make it available.
Gotcha. And follow-up question, probably can't share this with us, but one of the group wants to know if President Joe Biden has been giving you a call about this by any chance. Is you on his bat phone, if you will? But I think they're sort of joking to some degree, but at the same time, I think the seriousness around the question is with the importance and excitement around what you're doing. It seems like the elected official should be aware at some point that there is a possibility to bring this to market, and sometime soon. And what we saw over the last year or so, right, that we've been through this, some push from elected officials to push the process forward. Is there anything to believe that you can share with us regards to this in any way, or
John, I think the key point on this is those kinds of very exciting possible discussions are data driven. Mm-hmm. So when I have the data, I will drive it, or it'll be driven for me. But you have to have the data first.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add. Yeah, I mean, I'll supplement that a little bit, John. It's the prior question. I mean, I think our overall goal is to develop these therapies as quickly as possible. So if we need to go to Australia to do a clinical study that can be done more quickly, say in the United States, that's why we would go there. It's all about speed of development. So we're moving as quickly as we can to get these developed and to get them approved. And whether it's United States first or another country first, matters a little less. We're just trying to work as quickly as we can.
Just as a very practical point on that, when my U.S. regulatory team is working, the folks in Australia are sleeping, and when my folks in the U.S. are sleeping, Australia is doing clinical trials. So we are a 24/7 operation this last year. Well,
Dr. Quay, since I've known you, I would say that you work 24/7, 365. I know your mind never stops. If you do give it time to sleep, it's pretty amazing to see what is going to be come out of you next. Speaking of that, one of the group of the tribe here wanted to know, with this increased balance sheet that you've had recently and the trials at hand, is there an argument that you might look towards acquiring or bringing in other programs? To what degree is there any direction you could share with the audience on this subject?
Yeah, that's a perfectly appropriate question, and exactly something that you should expect us to be looking at. We're going to be very selective. I have a very high hurdle for what we would do, but absolutely, this balance sheet allows us to be really opportunistic, to have adjacent programs in breast cancer or COVID or other infectious diseases, other aspects of oncology. Thinking about going from breast cancer and COVID to oncology and infectious diseases for me is a pretty easy concept to kind of broaden those words a little bit. So, Kyle, if you have additional comments.
Yeah, I will absolutely be opportunistic on potential acquisitions. I mean, we need to balance the appeal of a acquisition against our programs that we have that we're very excited about. And we have some great opportunities right in front of us that we're working on. So anything we would do, it would have to be very complementary and not detract from our existing programs.
Okay, that makes sense. Here's a question. It says, Dr. Quay released news that SARS-CoV-2 versus a virus was 99.8% likely to be leaked from the lab. Has ATOS always been operating under this rumor that this was lab grown that is now confirmed? Essentially, was the speculation known during development of this the development of an idea of ATO 201 and 301?
So yeah, that's a legitimate question. So the motivation for investigating the origin was to figure out what best therapeutic should be used. There are some subtle differences in how you would develop a therapeutic versus if it came from a laboratory, if it came from nature. So trying to get to the bottom of that distinction was important. And I think from Atossa's perspective, I'm very satisfied that our products are addressing just what you'd expect in what looks like probably an accidental release from a laboratory.
Fantastic. I know we've come upon a little over 30 minutes here, and I appreciate you taking the time. Is there, just a reminder, everyone, I'll do my best to get this video up at the Tribe Public YouTube channel. Just if you haven't been there yet, it's just put in Tribe Public, TRIB Public, and you'll find it straight away. And please subscribe there too, so you'll get notified when that gets published each time. What I would like to, and then also any questions that didn't get answered, I will collect them all, and please send them to me, and maybe we can do a follow-up call, even just to address the additional questions once we get a little bit of space here in time for the two gentlemen that are working so hard every day for us. Stephen, Kyle, thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to share with us before we sign off today?
No, John, I just want to thank you again for your platform and what you put together for us. It gives us a chance to talk in a little more informal fashion with our shareholders. And as you say, I think we're probably talking to people all the way around the globe. So it's technology is a pretty wonderful thing, and I appreciate your using it on our behalf.
Absolutely. And Kyle, is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah. Thanks again, John. It's good to get some extra publicity here. I think the news is dominated by the bigger companies, particularly in the COVID area. And we're working on some transformative things here. So it's good to get some more eyes on us and some more awareness around what we're doing. So thank you.
Absolutely. You're both very welcome. And I really enjoy getting to know the both of you over the last couple of years, and also seeing the excitement, development, and the evolution of Atossa. I commend both of you for your hard work. To the tribe, thank you for coming in here. Again, I believe in this democratic process. I believe in having everyone that in the market that wants to be in the market. This is one of the reasons I put together Vista Partners, as well as the tribe, is this is all about all of us. It's not just about what John Heerdink believes is important or not, or any one of us. It's about the group. So continue to bring your ideas and wishes forward. Again, if you didn't get the answers that you wanted today, all of them our questions answered, send them to me. We'll do our best to get back the Atossa team on here as soon as possible. And thanks for joining the tribe, and thank you too for joining. Good luck, and let's get this pushed through the FDA, and most importantly, in the hands of everyone that in the world here. So again, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week, and congratulations.
Thanks, John. Everyone stay in good health in 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, John.